Robin one and the Flash and stuff, like you were doing a lot of talking. So
Yeah.
it's just something that me and John actually know stuff about.
Yeah, I mean, I know little bits and pieces, and I started to try to research, and it started to get very much like if you give a moose a muffin, it's like, oh, okay, I gotta go to know about Ben Reilly. You also have to know about Kaine. To know about Kaine, you also have to know about this. So I just found myself in like a research hole.
Yeah, it's tough. We're gonna try and like this is why John said it could that last 2 hours because it's a lot of stuff, but we'll try to be as concise as possible. So basically, Ben Reilly can run super fast, but then he also has the powers of being able to not age. And he has what was the other shit the Flash could do? I've already forgotten.
My favorite one is that he could vibrate his eyes so that he could see other rays of light.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Of course.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that's how anything works. Yeah.
Yeah. So now that you've compared it to the Flash, I now have a basis of understanding.
Yes, you know.
Hi everyone. This is the Smark Avengers. I'm with Corey and with John and Dylan. Obviously, we're on our fucking A game today. Okay. So real quick, because I want to make this a recurring bit. John, what is your current movie? How many movies have you watched so far this year?
I've just watched my 270th movie.
That sounds delightful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's not expand on that at all.
Let's move on with the show.
Moving on with the show. So speaking of moving on with the show, we've had some really odd kind of episodes lately. We had the WrestleMania rundown where Dylan was in America. We talked through like all 16, however many X-Men movies were last time. So really in-depth stuff that we've been going through, great amount of detail. And so we're going to focus on one particular character today, which I thought was going to be easy, but in my own research for it, I ended up having to read about like 4 or 5 other characters. So, John, Dylan, do you want to cue this one up?
Yes. The reason Corey had so much problem with this, it's because it's a very complicated character, Ben Reilly. He originated in the 70s, really. Technically, it was the first appearance of the character, but he became Ben Reilly with the name and the appearance and the costume and everything like that in the 90s during the Clone Saga, which notoriously is incredibly convoluted. And to parlay a phrase from the Smark part of our name, very overbooked.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Tiny bit.
So it's very confusing, but we're going to try to lay it out as succinctly as we can. Ben Reilly was a very popular character in the 90s, despite the fact that the Clone Saga was a bit of a mess. And so after he disappeared from comics, for a long time there was a big kind of fan clamoring to bring him back because, as we know, very few people in comics stay dead. But for a long time, Ben Reilly did. And then he came back not that long ago. So, and he's still in the comics today.
Yeah.
So I think we should start at the very beginning. We have to talk about a character called the Jackal. Corey, are you familiar with the Jackal?
I will tell you I am both familiar and unfamiliar with the Jackal. I remember hearing the name the Jackal a lot. And then when I would see images of the Jackal in the comics, it looked like a weird green little guy. And that's not usually how one would depict a Jackal.
A weird little guy. You're not wrong. Really. The Jackal was originally Professor Miles Warren, who taught Peter Parker in whatever university he went to. Peter Parker University. They named it after him. He was very happy about it. That part might not be true. He also taught Gwen Stacy. And he really liked Gwen Stacy, despite the fact that he was a middle-aged man and she was in school. But he went mad, as people often do in comics, after the love of his life that didn't know that she was the love of his life accidentally fell off a bridge, as people often did in comics. And so obviously Miles Warren was very upset by this, and he not only was upset at the fact that he lost the love of his life, Gwen Stacy, but also he was mad because he believed that Spider-Man had a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So he somehow, I'm not totally sure how, but he figures out that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are one and the same. I'm not totally sure how he did this, but he did.
Do you remember when we were talking about our own Sinister Sixes and we talked about the claw or the crab, and we said maybe he would just always knew that he was Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Maybe that's
I
what
mean,
happened.
Yeah, like sometimes Peter Parker turns up to his class and he's still got the mask on, and Miles Warren's like, "What do you do? What do you do? What's up with the Spider-Man mask there, Peter Parker?" And Peter Parker's
He's
like,
taking
"Oh,
he's taking the roll call for the morning.
yeah."
Peter Parker, and then Spider-Man stands up and puts his hand up. Present.
He's like, "Oh shit,
Son of a
forget that
bitch.
bit." Yeah, it's not me. I'm Spider-Man. I mean, Peter Parker. I like the thought bubble above the Jackal's head is like, that's when I started to suspect, you know.
Yeah.
So somehow Miles Warren starts to experiment with cloning, and he figures out how to clone people with the intent of bringing Gwen Stacy back. He wants to clone her for totally normal, legit, just to hang out. Why else would you clone a girl that you love and she doesn't know you exist? Just to talk, you know.
I don't know. I think he wanted his own personal clone sex doll, to be honest.
I like you do.
You know, it's comics. They couldn't specifically say that. So what happens is there's a lot of clone stuff, yada yada. The crux of this is that at some point the Jackal clones Spider-Man. He knocks out Spider-Man, he clones Spider-Man, and then both Spider-Man and the clone wake up with no memory of like what, neither of them have any memory of like what happened for the last, I don't know, day or whatever. And they're both in, I think it's Shea Stadium.
Yes, I believe so.
And the Jackal has wired like a bomb to the stadium, is going to blow them both up. And with the idea that neither clone nor real Spider-Man are actually sure which one is the real Spider-Man, because they both have the same memories, and they both, you know, were knocked out or whatever by the time they got into the stadium. So they have a fight, and then they figure out which one's the real Spider-Man and which one's the clone. The real Spider-Man, I think, escaped in time. The bomb goes off.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but I think the bomb goes off, but Spider-Man escapes. The clone Spider-Man appears to be dead, and Spider-Man, the real Spider-Man, collects the clone body of himself and hides
Which
it.
I imagine is a surreal fucking feeling.
Yeah, imagine just
Yeah.
picking yourself up that's died.
There's my dead body right in front of me.
Wow, it's my face. And then he, you know, he tactfully does what anybody would do. If you had a clone of yourself that was dead, what would you do? You pay the respect it deserves by throwing it into a smokestack.
Ah! The smokestack.
Correct. Into a big chimney.
Yep.
So that it would burn up and dispose of all the evidence, right?
Oh,
Of
okay.
course.
I was thinking like, so this is like a smokestack over like an industrial like
Yeah.
burning fire. So I just thought it was just like just dropping it down someone's fucking chimney like a morbid
No.
Santa Claus.
No, not somebody's chimney, but like a big industrial chimney.
Okay, Jesus
And-
Christ.
So the idea was, this was like a kind of story in the 70s. It was a twisty kind of story. You know, the Jackal is evil, clone, haha, good one. And then in the 90s.
Hold
Okay, go
on,
ahead.
hold on. I'm going to ask questions, and I will attempt not to derail the conversation by these questions. These are just genuine questions. Somebody in the 90s read that storyline, and they said, we should really expand on that.
Yes.
Like, of all the
Of course.
storylines that happened in the 1970s, that was the one they honed in on.
Yes.
Because I'll be honest with you, just hearing that conversation about, like, oh, the real one fought the clone one, and they weren't sure, but then the clone, that was... that was already confusing a bit. And then just to add in this little small element here, Much like how like Spider-Man's arch nemesis is the Green Goblin, I don't see what clones have anything to do with spiders. I'm so thrown off by like why all of the Marvel characters that was going to get caught up in a bunch of clone stuff, they went with Spider-Man, who I always kind of felt was more like a slice of life character in regards, because he's like always the down on his luck guy, can't pay his bills, getting chewed out by his boss.
Correct. I think that was part of it. Like the whole point of this, because it all wraps itself up, really.
Okay.
This one story kind of wraps itself up. There's a clone. Spider-Man gets rid of the clone. I think at the end of the story, like Miles Warren like repents, where he feels bad or something. Like, you know what I mean? Everything kind of wraps itself up. And he disposes of the body, yada yada. Again, that's a bit much, throwing it in the fucking chimney, but it all kind of wrapped up in a way that you like. This is just a story to kind of like add a little bit of spice to Spider-Man, but not necessarily way heavy on the clone issue. It's just something that happened to Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
In much the same way that you wouldn't expect a alien suit from space to be relevant to the everyday Spider-Man. It's just a thing that happened, and then some fucking guy was like, "No, let's keep doing it."
Yeah, let's keep this going.
Yeah. So in the 90s,
we'll cut to the 90s.
Yeah, so in the 90s, technically it's been like, 20 years, whatever, in real time. But in comic time, it's only been 5 years. What happens is, in the 90s, Aunt May gets very sick. Peter Parker's Aunt May gets very sick. She's in the hospital. She's on the brink of death. And Peter Parker is very distraught. And he is suddenly surprised. I don't remember where this happens, but at some point, he meets somebody who is also coming to pay their respect to their Aunt May. And that person is Ben Reilly. So Ben Reilly is the clone of Spider-Man that Spider-Man threw into the fucking smokestack. He didn't die. He survived. And he crawled himself out of the smokestack, and he was going to go. He found his way to Peter Parker's house and was going to confront him until he looked through the window and saw Peter Parker having a wonderful life with his wonderful girlfriend at the time. I don't know if they were married.
I think
Mary
they
Jane
might have
Watson.
been.
Were they married?
I think so, but yeah.
Okay. I don't remember. But he witnessed this and thought, "There's no life here for me," and he went off as a drifter. And he took his names from his grandparents, his Uncle Ben and his Aunt May. Those aren't his grandparents. Whatever the fuck that is, that relation.
Uncle and aunt.
Correct. I just said it out loud. Oh, boy. So Uncle Ben and Aunt May's surname before Parker was Reilly, so he called himself Ben Reilly, and he went off on some misadventures for 5 years. He heard that his aunt was sick and decided to come pay respects, and then the two Peter Parkers came face to face, which is a very surreal moment. So again, like to Corey's point, it seems like somebody in Marvel realized that this thing happened in the comics 20 years ago and thought, wouldn't it be funny if the clone wasn't dead? Haha, we could probably spin a couple of weeks out of this.
Cut to 5 years.
Yeah. Well, I think
So-
they had planned this to be like a big kind of year-long thing. There's actually, I'd like to talk about this real quick, but
Sure.
there is a website. It's like a blog spot thing called The Life of Reilly, which is a really, really good kind of blog that talks about the entire run of like Ben Reilly and the Clone Saga in extreme detail. And it also kind of talks about what the writers originally had planned. Like how they kind of talked about how it was only going to be like a 6 month or like a 1 year kind of deal, what their original plans were, how they were going to wrap it up. And you can see how along the way editorial issues and other things kind of the popularity of Ben Reilly, etc., made it last longer than it needed to.
So I went to that website, Dylan.
Sorry?
I went to that website, Life of Reilly.
Yes.
So it is benreillytribute.x10host.com.
That's not the one
10
I'm on.
Really?
Oh.
Because this says the Ben Reilly Tribute.
The
Yeah.
one I'm
And the
on
Ben
is
Reilly Tribute presents the life of Riley, and it's like a 35-part series.
maybe that is the same one because this one's 35 parts. Yeah, this is like Life of
Yeah.
Riley Archives.blogspot.com.
Yeah, no,
Probably
this
the
is
same
just a
thing.
different website, but it looks like it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, 35 parts.
Jesus Christ.
That for some reference will explain to you and to all the people listening exactly what went on in Spider-Man in the 90s. This lasted a long time,
Hmm.
and despite the popularity of Ben Reilly, some people didn't care much for this.
Well, I think this was the case of there being a lot of writers coming in and out of the story and each having different ideas and stuff as well.
Yes.
So, uh, there was a bit of a disconnect from where they started to probably where it ended up going. But
Yes, I think
mean, I
Yeah.
guess that's the
kind of
nature of
like
comics in a way.
to keep it to make it a little relevant. It's a little bit how Jonathan Hickman started the X-Men Utopia thing, and the way it ended was certainly not the way he envisioned it ending, because he didn't end it. It went through a couple of more twists and turns. I will say that obviously the Clone Saga went through many, many more twists and turns, many, many more writers and editorial changes and things like this. But you know, it's just the nature of comics, I think. Overcomplicate things.
Of course.
Do you have any other questions at the moment, Corey?
Well, I was gonna say that I'm glad you brought up the Hickman stuff, because like this does feel very much like kind of Krakoa, that you could tell there was like a story in mind, and then more people got involved and other people had other ideas, and then it went on and on and on and on and on until it
Yes.
started to not really look like how it used to.
Well, as far I think it's on that blog spot, that website, but there is online you can find out what the original writers planned for it to look like and how long they planned for it to go, and they were way off. And by the end of it, I think, funny enough, what's really funny about it is by the end of the story, some of the like a lot of the ideas they did plan kind of come back around. Anyway, it's just that it took so many people saying no, we're not doing this, to eventually say okay, we're doing this, and then it ended. You know, they could have ended it years ago, but they just fluffed it out and just ended it anyway. You know, which is quite funny. So at first we have two Peter Parkers looking at each other. One's Ben Reilly, one's Peter Parker, and Ben Reilly becomes the Scarlet Spider. He doesn't become a Spider-Man. He becomes the Scarlet Spider. So he has like a kind of like a red costume with like a blue hoodie.
Yeah, is there an explanation for the blue hoodie?
I don't remember. I think it was just because it was cool and the 90s.
Fair enough.
Was there an explanation?
I don't know. I dug a lot of the 90s costumes a lot of people make fun of. I will say that I've always been amused by the little pouches at his ankles. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It looks like he's wearing ankle weights.
Well, that's what I loved about the him as Spider. Well, we'll get to that. But I love the him as Spider-Man costume. I actually really like the Scarlet Spider costume as well. I thought by this point, Spider-Man has been in the same costume pretty much for his entire, career, and the Scarlet Spider comes along and has a totally different look. It's still Spider-Man, but he looks very 90s. But not over the top 90s. He's not got a skateboard, or a pair of sunglasses.
That does remind me, we should have like an episode where we discuss the most 90s characters possible. Because I know some off the top of my fucking head. When you just mentioned like skateboard, I went, oh, but I know of some who do.
Let's continue. So there was a while where Spider-Man and the Scarlet Spider were fighting crime together as a Spider-Man tag team. So
I think at this point you can't really talk about Ben Reilly without mentioning Kaine as well.
That's what I've been looking for.
Yeah, okay. So things are going to get a little sticky here, okay? The idea behind Kaine was that whenever the Jackal was making the Ben Reilly clone. The Ben Reilly clone wasn't the first clone. There were others. And one of the clones before Ben Reilly was Kaine. And he came out with his face all disfigured. And he had like this kind of like his cells were like degenerate because he was a clone. His cells were falling apart much quicker than should have been. So the Jackal gave him this weird like bodysuit that held his body together, which is such a wonderful like comics explanation that makes fucking no sense at all. If by the way you could see this old bodysuit, you'd be like, how did that hold his cells together? Right? It doesn't make any sense, but in comics you're like, this makes as much sense as this being the fourth clone of Spider-Man, so why not?
Yeah, he's like covered in like what appears to be these really swollen, engorged veins.
Yeah. It's
unpleasant to look at.
My favorite thing about Kaine was, instead of having the ability to climb up walls like Peter Parker and Ben Reilly, that part of his body also degenerated. So instead of being able to stick to walls, his hands actually left like a corrosive touch. They burned into stuff instead, which I thought was actually a really good idea. I really liked that. And you know, Kaine was this horribly disfigured person who escaped somehow, and I think he always hated Peter Parker because he wanted his clone Ben Reilly to have the life that he should have had. I can't remember. Now this is where things start to get sticky. John, am I correct or incorrect in this? Because I can't remember if he hates Peter Parker or if he hates Ben Reilly.
I believe he hates Peter Parker because the idea was they did like a test and it came back and it showed that the Peter Parker who'd been in the comics for years and years was actually the clone, and Ben Reilly was the real Peter Parker.
Yes.
Which
so that was the twist.
Yeah, and that sort of spurned Peter Parker like essentially giving up the role of Spider-Man and Ben Reilly taking over. But even then, it didn't turn out that was true because there was some shenanigans going on.
A lot of shenanigans, yes.
Yes.
The idea is they went to the Jackal himself to decide who was the clone and who was the real one. Because again, the whole crux of the original storyline was neither of them were really sure. So they went back and did the test, and it turned out that Ben Reilly, according to the Jackal's tests, with his big machines and whatnot, and also being the fucking guy that created them, his test revealed that Ben Reilly, or the person that we all believed to be Ben Reilly, was the original Spider-Man. And the person that we thought for the last 5 years had been Peter Parker was actually the clone Ben Reilly. Do you follow this part?
Yeah, I'm okay so far.
So it means that since the person that was found in the smokestack was away for 5 years, and the person that went back to Peter Parker's house and lived as Spider-Man for 5 years, they kind of it was as if they were, they'd switched places. The person who went back to Peter Parker's house and lived with Mary Jane for 5 years was actually the clone. And the person who thought he was Ben Reilly and lived as an outcast for 5 years was actually Peter Parker. So the idea behind Kaine was he apparently knew this and chased after Ben Reilly because he wanted the clone to just live his life as a clone. And didn't like Peter Parker. Fuck him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they had a big fight, and it was a lot of fun. They were always at each other's throats. So after this news, Peter Parker was devastated and thought, since you're the real Spider-Man, you can be Spider-Man. I'm going to retire. I'm going to kind of take a back seat. I'm going to go live with my wife who is pregnant. We're going to have a little spider kid. So you're Spider-Man now. And Ben Reilly was like, woohoo! I assume he didn't. I don't think he said that, but.
You think he said woohoo?
Maybe he did. There's a wee panel of him like fist bumping, like, woohoo! I did it. It's me, Spider-Man.
Well, I mean, the voice actor for Mario did retire recently, so maybe he's gonna pick up work as Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's got to do something. Get a build. So Spider-Man, now that he is Ben Reilly, to differentiate himself from the Peter Parker version that had kind of stolen his memories for 5 years, he gets a new costume. And I love this costume. It was super cool. It was still like red and blue, but like it looked totally different. The web shooters kind of stood out like little gauntlets around his wrists. I loved that costume. I loved Ben Reilly as Spider-Man. I thought he was super cool. He was blonde.
See, that's why I liked him. That's why I liked Ben Reilly as Spider-Man. I his costume was cooler.
Yeah. I mean, also he's blonde. That's how they told the difference between the two of them.
Which
now
isn't
am I
exactly a
jumping ahead
great
of-
disguise.
What?
Like, surely if he meets people, they're going to recognize it's Peter Parker.
Don't
just
you
with
look
his,
like Peter
his
Parker but blonde?
hair
Like,
blonde?
correct.
Yeah.
No, Peter Parker's a brunette. What are you talking about?
It's
That's
the 90s.
different.
At least grow a goatee or something. Come on.
Oh my god, could you imagine him with a goatee? I've been scrolling through the life of Riley as we've been talking, and I am seeing so much fucking fantastic 90s art, it sickens me.
Oh yeah, dude, the art was fucking cool as hell.
It's
Some
amazing.
of it's fucking ruled.
Some of it's amazing, and some of it is a little rough. But
Oh yeah. There's a guy that I didn't. I think it was Steve Skro, like would do Spider-Man stuff, and I hated his artwork. I hated it, but a lot of it I thought was really cool. You know, J.R. Jr. did some stuff, and Mark Bagley did some stuff. There was a lot of really good stuff. Luke Ross, like there was some really really cool artists doing a lot of that work. Again, we had like 5 years of, and then also like 5 different books. I think there was like 4 or 5 different Spider-Man books a month. You know, so there was a lot of art, a lot of work went into this little project. So, where were we? Do you have any more questions, or shall we continue on?
so there are names. I keep seeing names pop up.
We
and
can help you with this.
okay, Trainer Seward.
Super Trainer was a man that Ben Reilly befriended during his exile, during the 5 years. That
Who
helped him
originally
out.
was like a scientist.
Yes.
But then he had some sort of weird, almost like cosmic powers at some point, which, yeah, didn't really make sense.
Yeah, they didn't really follow that up too much.
No.
No. So Stuart Trainer was the one that helped Ben Reilly get to do the deal with the Jackal to find out which one was, because obviously neither of them trusted the Jackal, but Ben could vouch for Stuart Trainer. He was like, I know this man, I trust him with my life. So that's probably normal. There's no shenanigans there, right? That's
No.
where he comes in. Any other questions about any other characters?
Who's the Traveler?
Judas Traveler was a character. Judas Traveler pretty much encapsulates everything about the Clone Saga, which was that he was a character that came in to add a little bit of mystery and intrigue, that had phenomenal cosmic powers beyond the scope of understanding. So huge, in fact, that the writers didn't know what the fuck he was supposed to do or why he was there. So
Oh, yeah.
he was,
Just to correct myself, that's who I was thinking of. That.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't remember if Stuart had powers or not. Because again, it's the 90s. Like, why wouldn't they just give him powers, right?
Yeah.
Stuart was he was a scientist that knew Ben Reilly, and Judas Traveler was a guy that was supposedly around to kind of judge people for his own twisted reasons. But again, nobody knew what those reasons were. Nobody knew why he was so insanely powerful or why he would have any interest in Spider-Man. And then they kind of retconned that near the end of the Clone Saga to just say he had the power of inducing mental images in people. So when they thought he was incredibly powerful, he just made them think he was. And he had an interest in both Spider-Man because he was a psychiatrist. And I'm like, okay.
All right. All right.
It answers those questions, I guess.
All right.
Off to the next one, you know?
I got another question for you.
At the beginning of the Clone Saga, he seemed like an important person. He's a red herring. He means nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember like having so back in the 90s when I was a child, they would sell trading cards of like Marvel characters. And I remember getting one for the Traveler, and I'm like, who's this old man? Why does he look like he listens exclusively to the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan? Like, what am I supposed to take away from this person?
Why is he in like ZZ Top or whatever, right?
Yeah. So, all right, the next one. I saw this character, and it filled me with a sense of joy that I have not felt since I was a small boy. Who's Spidercide?
Spidercide, I believe, was another clone.
Yes.
Have you looked at Spidercide recently? Because
Yes.
he looks fucking ridiculous, and I love that for him.
Correct.
So he was just another clone. That was it.
Yeah, I think so.
Basically.
I don't think it was
Nice.
a big backstory. I think he was another one of the clones that worked for the Jackal.
Was he? I
Nice.
can't remember. Was he mute or like just more monstrous anyway? Like he didn't really have much of a personality because he ended up. He got drafted in with Carnage and part of his crew, didn't he?
I think Spidercide. No, that was another one.
Was it?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, my memory is really fucking me up.
No, listen, you're understandable. There's so many different permutations to this. There's a lot to it. Spidercide, I think, was like the big, kind of muscly guy.
Mm.
And there was another clone that had like 6 arms.
Yeah. Spidercide was beefy.
Yes, the 6-arm one couldn't talk, and he was with Carnage.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, that was
remember.
Doppelganger.
Doppelganger, that's who it was.
Yeah, that's what they called
by
him.
that point, they just gave up.
Yeah, that was creative name they got. Oh, he's a doppelganger of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
A doppelganger.
Doppelganger.
He had a sick.
Again,
I remember he had a sick toy. Like when I was a kid, there was like a sick doppelganger figure.
yeah, he had like fangs and stuff, like weird
Yeah.
claws. But again, he was just a clone that went wrong, and he just ended up with 6 arms.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we're getting a lot of like characters that are there but have no real, like Spidercide seemed like a big muscly Spider-Man, but like I don't recall him doing a whole lot. And the same with Doppelganger, like he was in Maximum Carnage for a little bit, but that's simply because they didn't know what the fuck else to do with that guy. Just make him Carnage's pet, you know.
All right, I just saw a cyber hobgoblin.
That was Jason McIndale.
Yeah,
that's the one I picked.
He in a desperate attempt to continue to be feared, he got a lot of cybernetic. That by the way is around the time I started reading, and I remember reading those issues going, this fucking rules, because the artwork of that was sick as hell.
Was this before or after he was possessed by a demon?
I think this was after.
Yeah, it was after, because that was after Maximum Carnage.
But it's still part of him trying to claim that power that he so desperately wanted.
Yes.
And I really wish they had done more with him, because I felt like he was such a fun character in that he was so desperate to be dangerous, and he almost was, but he was always destined to be a loser. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I thought it was such a fun. It was a great place to start, despite the fact that I was like, what the fuck? Smokestack? What? Because you remember in comics, like the first page was always like in storyline, them talking to each other, but also like trying to recap all the shit that went on in the last couple of issues.
Mm.
So it's like Ben Reilly and Peter Parker just in their house, like, ha ha ha. Hey, remember that time I dropped you down in a smokestack and then you ran away for 5 years? And I'm like, what? You know? But yeah, dude, that was sick as hell. That was Jason McIndale as Cyber Hobgoblin, I guess. There's a lot of really cool villains, man. That was when the female Dr. Octopus was around.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of her right now.
She was the daughter of Stuart Traynor. So
yes.
she hated him and also hated Ben Reilly because her father liked Ben Reilly more than her, which is a perfect reason to become Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus, by the way, the original, died because Kaine snapped his neck.
Mm-hmm.
In a way to really big up Kaine, be like, how do you make this guy look like a killer? Literally kill one of Spider-Man's oldest and deadliest foes. straight up. So there you go. Who else is on the list? There's a lot.
We talked about Kaine. We talked about Seward. We talked about Lady Doc Octopus. We talked about Cybernetic Hobgoblin. We talked about the Traveler. I don't know. Should I let you guys get back to what the order you were presenting in?
Well, we're trying to go like kind of chronologically, but by this point, it's just Spider-Man having a lot of adventures. And
John, I just saw your boy, the Swarm.
Nice.
Yes, Swarm is there because I've read that issue too. What's funny about this is there's a lot of times when Ben Reilly as Spider-Man is fighting villains like Swarm and like Will-O-Wisp and stuff, where in the 5 years that he's been gone, Peter Parker has fought these guys, and they're like, "Oh, it's you, Spider-Man," and he's like, "I don't know who you are." We have never met, but he has to pretend that they have because he is Spider-Man. He just hasn't seen them in 5 years, you know. Well, I like that angle as well. So, what else? I mean, a lot of this is just Peter Parker on the sidelines and Ben Reilly, the new Spider-Man, trying to make an image. And again, I think the reason this went on for a long time was because.
Oh, I got another one.
Okay.
Scryer.
Okay, Scryer was originally a separate character that looked a little bit like the Nopheus from Spirited Away.
Yeah.
Big black cloak and a white face. And originally, he was one mysterious character introduced around the same time as Judas Traveler. Because they thought, why have one mysterious character when we can have a shit ton? But again, he was so mysterious that nobody really knew what to do with him for a long time. So towards the end of the Clone Saga, they started to reveal exactly what Scryer was, and I think we'll get to that in a second because Scryer has a lot to do with the end of the business.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we still have to get to the end of the Clone Saga and then all the weird stuff that happened to Ben Reilly after the fact.
Well, shall we just like kind of zip to the end?
Yeah.
Because
so there is a whole series. There's a whole series of Ben Reilly as Spider-Man.
Yes, it went on for a long time.
It went on for a long time because that's one of the comments I saw while scrolling through this was like, this was not the original plan.
No.
We did not know, like when they changed the plan, we didn't know what the new plan was. So new plans kept getting made all the time.
Yes.
So it does read disjointed. I do love that 90s style art though, like that late 90s style, like not necessarily the life-filled influence stuff, but just, you know, everyone just looked animated and I like that.
Yeah,
but
I miss that.
Yeah. It's, you know, I think there's not something wrong with a lot of comic art these days, but it lacks a lot of that character.
Yes, I think
so. So we had been doing that stuff. Kaine is still around. And
yes.
I love the fact that whenever they drew Kaine, he was so much bigger than everyone else.
Yeah.
Which is going to be confusing when we talk about Kaine as Scarlet Spider. Because that's why I was, I'm like, is this the same dude?
Correct. It is going to be
Indeed.
confusing. You might even say, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. So at some point, they all decide to start wrapping things up. The Judas Traveler bit gets wrapped up. And then we start to realize what happened with Scryer. At the same time, Peter Parker, at some point, as he retired from Spider-Man, he started to lose his powers for a while. And then they started to come back again. The reason in comics, the reason they thought his powers were disappearing was because he was a clone. So they're like, well, clones just kind of stop working after a while, right? That's just what happens. But his powers come back again. And Ben is a little unsure about this, but he's like, okay, that's good for you. Around the same time, Mary Jane Watson, who's very pregnant, starts to go into labor. So they take her to the hospital to give birth to a little baby, as is what happens whenever people are pregnant, or so I believe. So I've been told. So while all this happens, Ben Reilly and Peter Parker are suddenly fought against a guy that had appeared throughout the Clone Saga in bits and pieces. A man called Gaunt. I don't know if he came up in your search, Corey.
No, I did not see Gaunt.
Gaunt was a man that seemed to know Stuart Traynor somehow and was manipulating him. And from that point, we start to see a lot of things come together, which is that Stuart Traynor manipulated the results of the Jackal's first test between Peter Parker and Spider-Man to make it seem that the clone, Ben Reilly, was the real Spider-Man, and the real Spider-Man, Peter Parker, was the clone. This was done by Stuart Traynor without the Jackal even knowing, apparently. By the way, at some point in the 90s, the Jackal just like died. I
Got hit by a car.
Clear. I should make that clear. At some point, he just kind of died. It wasn't great. Despite the fact that he was the fucking linchpin in this entire fucking years-long thing, he wasn't even the main villain.
Mm-hmm.
He just died. And they were like, well, see you later. And like, wouldn't you have had him as like a linchpin in this? No, fuck it. That's not twisty-turny enough. So as things go on, Stuart Traynor is trying to find Ben Reilly to explain everything. He's very sorry about the life he's led, and he's trying to explain himself. He is eventually killed by Gaunt, who at the beginning of the Clone Saga was a very gaunt-looking man whose body was falling apart and was held together by cybernetics. And eventually, by the end of the Clone Saga, built up a much more robotic and evil, monstrous-looking body, and went to fight Peter Parker and Ben Reilly together. And it turns out that the Gaunt that they've been teasing for so long was Mendel Strom. Corey.
Great name.
Corey. Well, aren't you
Yes.
going to go, what? That guy?
No.
Okay.
I don't know who Mendelstrom is.
For the record, when I read this, after having read so much of the Clone Saga, I too went, huh? What the fuck? Mendelstrom was a very, very old friend of Norman Osborn's, legit in the comics from a long time ago. I think he was the Robot Master.
Well, I think originally
Yes,
he
that's
helped.
what I'm seeing.
He helped create the Goblin formula as well, and then
Correct.
I think Osborn had him like sent to prison or something.
Well,
I
he
also-
was in the Spider-Man movie too, by the looks of it.
I also believe part of it was Norman Osborn tested the Goblin formula on Mendelstrom, which is why Gaunt, who seemed to die from a heart attack, was still technically alive and very gaunt, and needed Stuart Traynor to help put him back together. So this is a tease, which I think we can all figure out the next part of it. Mendelstrom came back from the dead, technically, or he didn't die. So after the two Spider-Men beat up the evil Gaunt, the Robot Master, in some of the ugliest artwork I've ever seen. This was such a disappointment. I fucking hated this horrible bullshit artwork. This is the end of the Clone Saga, and they did this shit to me. So disappointed. But while all this is going on, Mary Jane gives birth to her baby. The doctor takes the baby and says, I'm sorry, your baby is not making any noise. You know,
Oh, so it's well behaved.
it's a lovely boy or girl that's so sweet. And I'm keeping it, bitch. He gives her the middle finger.
Yep. And then he ran away.
There's a very emotional part where it seems like Mary Jane's baby was stillborn, and we're very sad about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Cut to that doctor holding the baby on like a pier on the dock, and he gives the baby to, I don't remember if it was him or if it's like the nurse. I think it's the nurse at the hospital gives the baby to a mysterious man in the shadows. Corey, who could this mysterious man in the shadows be?
Mendelstrom. I don't know.
Who was Mendelstrom's friend? Who tested the Goblin Serum on Mendelstrom to realize that Mendelstrom didn't die after he ingested the Goblin Serum?
Oh,
Who
was
died?
it Orban?
Who died after getting the? Yep, that was the tease.
So this is how we get Green Goblin into this mess, huh?
Yes.
Who had
So it's,
famously been dead for like 30 years at this point.
Yep.
Yeah, a long time. Because like
Yep.
Harry, was this before or after? Was this before or
After.
after Harry Osborn's like breakdown?
After Harry Osborn's dead.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was trying
And-
to figure out. Was like, is Harry alive and was this what caused the breakdown?
For the record, at some point, somebody in Marvel wanted it to be Harry Osborn as a reveal, and they were like, "That sucks."
I don't know. I always
make
had a
it
soft
Norman
spot for Harry.
So I don't. Like, originally, they wanted it to be Norman Osborn, and somebody in Marvel said, "We're not bringing back Norman Osborn." 5 years later, somebody in Marvel went, "Okay, we'll make it Norman Osborn."
Yeah.
This is how it happened. So this is how Norman Osborn came back. And like I said, the teasers were there. It made it clear that the Goblin Serum could bring people back from the dead. Mendelstrom didn't actually die. He just appeared to be dead. And the same thing happened with Norman Osborn. It appeared that he was dead, but whenever they brought him to the morgue, he came back to life and just escaped. The way he put it was he killed a homeless man and just left him in the morgue instead, and everybody just went with it.
Yeah.
Well, this body looks nothing like Tommy Lee Jones. Surely.
Yes.
Oh, never mind. I'm just overlooking it.
So, to go back to an earlier point, there was a wonderful one issue thing that explained Norman Osborn's point of view because he wrote like a journal of it. It's
Sure.
really good because they do their best to explain it. And honestly, this
Dear
journal did a
diary.
great job. Pretty much. He's like,
Today I
this is-
stole a lifeless baby.
He's like, this is the day I get my revenge on Peter Parker. But it talks about him going to, after he comes back from the dead, he's like, I can't just turn up, right? People will think that's weird. So I'm going to go to Europe. And he starts, well, he doesn't start, he becomes a part of a mysterious cult called the Scryers, which is a big group of people who all dress in a big black robe and the white mask. And he eventually becomes the leader of the Scryers. So from that, it becomes determined that the one Scryer that we saw previously was actually one of many from the cult, and they were Norman Osborn's eyes and ears in America. And so through this, he was able to determine exactly when was the best time for him to come back and strike. He was able to use Scryers to determine when is the best time to fuck with Peter Parker, essentially. I'm like, this all like kind of works, you know? I can kind of believe this. You know? So
Sure.
It all ends with a big brutal fight between Norman Osborn, Peter Parker, Ben Reilly. Norman Osborn, by the way, beats the fuck out of Ben Reilly. JR Jr. does the artwork for it. He makes him look like he is just.
Yeah, JR does really
He like
fun
his
job
face
about
has been
brutalizing
broken
people.
up.
Yeah, like that man's face is gone essentially based off of how JR draws it.
Can you see the picture?
I have seen many of
Okay.
JR's beat down photos before.
It's a wonderful thing. So there's a bit where Norman Osborn is about to impale Peter Parker with his own Goblin glider, a la, the way he tried to do before. Ben Reilly bravely jumps in front of it, takes the brunt of it. Spider-Man beats up Norman Osborn, and Ben Reilly, the clone, just kind of disintegrates because he's a clone.
He's
The idea was that all the clones eventually would disintegrate, and that's what happens. Bear in mind, at this point, Kaine is supposed to be in prison, I think. So let's not worry about his disintegration just yet. Let's just remember the fact that Ben Reilly disintegrated because he got attacked by the Goblin Glider, so it happened much quicker than it normally would have. But we don't really have a good time frame for when it would have happened. And that was it. That was kind of the end of the Clone Saga, That was the end of Ben Reilly. He went out as a hero, saving his buddy and brother and self. And, they stopped the evil Green Goblin. It brought Norman Osborn back into the comics, which had a big lasting effect.
Of course.
Norman Osborn he became, he took over the Daily Bugle, and then he became the leader of Hammer, and would it be like the mayor of New York or something?
Well, he was in charge of the Avengers. He had his own Dark Avengers team. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this was all like the catalyst for a lot of that. So that's kind of the story of Ben Reilly during the Clone Saga, as succinctly as we think we could have put it. Are there any questions so far?
So
Yes, I have one question. What the fuck?
So I mean, it does sound like it was just sort of a mess of editorial getting involved and plans changing due to some successes and some not. As I was scrolling through that, I did see something that did kind of crack me up, where it was like, oh, there was a decision to cancel Thunderstrike and War Machine and the 2099 titles, not because they weren't successful, but because they thought they were weakening the core titles instead. And I'm guessing that's kind of what happened with Ben Reilly's Spider-Man, is that eventually they felt like they had to put Peter back into the role after an extended period of him not in the role because they thought it was hurting the brand.
I think so. Like, Ben Reilly proved to be like surprisingly popular.
Yeah.
But I also think that their original plan was always for Peter Parker to be Spider-Man. They had to status quo it once again.
We talked a little bit about it, but we didn't really get too into detail. And it's kind of one of those things about legacy characters. Is that when they introduce this is the new whatever, eventually they do return it to status quo. It's very rare that person who is like, suddenly this person's this character now, that stays for a long time. Marvel's currently doing that right now with Moon Knight, for example. Like, Mark Spector is not Moon Knight. It's this other character who's Moon Knight. And it's like, it's going to make for an interesting storyline, sure, but it's not permanent by any means.
Well, I feel like that's always kind of part of the problem. Like, whenever they did Spider-Man, the Superior Spider-Man,
Yeah,
Dr. Octopus, I liked that angle, but having lived through the Clone Saga, I knew that this obviously wasn't going to be the status quo, because if they didn't do it with Ben Reilly, they're sure as fuck not doing it with Dr. Octopus. And again, they gave it a good go. They made you think it was different, but in the end, they still pulled the rug back.
Yeah.
I would really prefer. I liked the Superior Spider-Man at the time, the original run, but obviously, you have that. In that case, you have to go back to Peter Parker. Whereas with the Ben Reilly run, it was, I think part of the reason it went on for so long was because Ben Reilly proved to be surprisingly popular.
And they gave Peter a farewell, like Peter gets to be normal. He gets his wife, and he gets to have a kid. And I mean, it seemed like they were setting that up.
The joke of it all is that Ben Reilly is still really Spider-Man, Peter Parker. Like, because of the way they did it, he's still, the way they had done it originally was, he was the original Spider-Man anyway. So it's still fine,
Yeah.
I mean, in
a lot of ways, I kind of like that, because it's sort of like Peter has all of these other responsibilities in his life. Like, he's got this relationship, he's got a kid on the way. Ben had fucking nothing to do but be Spider-Man. So in reality, it kind of was the best situation for everyone.
And also, we've heard the rumors or the stories that a lot of the people in Marvel management didn't like the partnership, the marriage of Mary Jane and Peter Parker.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the perfect out. Peter Parker could still kind of be married to Mary Jane. And also, Ben Reilly is still really Peter Parker. He's now Spider-Man. Like, you got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and yet
they still were like, fuck you, we're not doing it.
And they could do the occasional team up every now and then where Peter comes in and helps out with something.
Yes, they absolutely could have. I don't know why they didn't. Like, it's very interesting. But
it is.
The way they did it was, Ben was always a clone, and he died. And for a long time, people, nostalgia-wise, were like, you know what? It was a cool costume. He was a really fun character. It's a nice twist on Spider-Man that genuinely shook things up. It really did. It was the kind of thing Spider-Man needed. I know that the Clone Saga was needlessly complicated, but it also was just like something wild. And the 90s did that a lot, with like the death of Superman, for example. There was a lot of like really shaking these characters up. And I
Yeah.
feel like the big problem that they all suffered from was the shakeups in the end didn't matter.
No.
They all went back to status quo.
Some
which
of them
was-
took a little longer than others, but yeah.
Correct. But yes, it's a shame. So for a long time, Ben Reilly remained dead, and people were calling out to return the Scarlet Spider. So Marvel said, "Okay, you guys want Scarlet Spider? We're gonna give you the Scarlet Spider," which technically they did,
Yep.
where they brought Kaine back and just made him the Scarlet Spider, which I fucking hated.
I
Because
remember that series took place in Houston,
yes,
and they made a joke about how there weren't as many tall buildings in Houston for him to swing off of.
yes. Wait, John, do you have something to say about this?
I wasn't a huge fan of this series either, to be honest. I liked the costume. I thought it looked
Yeah, it's
pretty
good.
cool. But
Well, let me ask you this: like, why did you not like it?
well, like you say, the Houston setting probably didn't help too much because it was a bit too far removed from everything else. There wasn't any like established villains really that he was going up against. It was all these random like local villains who weren't that interesting. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It didn't really click. And I think as well because I loved the original Kane when he came in and he was like a big monstrous guy who it was Peter Parker gone wrong basically, and he had no compunction about killing people and doing all this stuff whatever he felt was right. And now he's basically
The opposite.
more yeah, he's more like Peter Parker,
Yes,
and it felt like a bit of a
because we already have Peter
regression.
Parker.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need another one.
Exactly. The problem with bringing Kaine back was they ruined everything cool about Kaine.
So we'll touch on that, and we'll move away from Kane,
Sure.
because I feel like we could probably talk about Kane, Scarlet Spider for a bit, just based off how you
Not-
two feel
Not
about him.
really. I think we're done.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move forward and move into. Are we talking about the return of the Jackal?
Yes.
All right.
I was very excited to read this because, like I said, I was a big fan of the Clone Saga. Maybe one of the 5 people in the world that was a fan of the Clone Saga. But I loved it. And then we saw the new Jackal. Because, Corey, as you've seen, the old Jackal looked like a
Green little
little
guy.
green man, a little green boy. Not like a jackal, but some kind of humanoid, fuzzy green thing. Almost a little bit like a green goblin,
Mm-hmm.
but not that. There was a reason for that. Like Miles Warren went through some kind of genetic stuff himself to make him a good fighter for whenever he would fight Spider-Man. So he turned himself into whatever that is.
Is that I thought it was a costume.
No,
No, it didn't look like a costume. That's for sure.
the I think originally it was a costume, and then he made it a genetic like modification of his own body.
Right.
Now, the reason you probably thought it was a costume was for later on when we see the Jackal, he has made clones of Miles Warren,
Mm-hmm.
which would make you think that he's making clones of himself. But that also means he must have DNA of himself as Miles Warren that he used to clone that part of himself. It's very confusing. The whole clone business is so confusing.
I think that he had a history of making clones of himself because it wasn't that very first appearance in Shea Stadium when the bomb blows up, like it's made to look as if the Jackal died in that explosion,
Yes.
but that turned out to just be a clone.
Yes, more clones. Clones everywhere, dude.
Yeah.
That's cloning up, baby. At some point, the Jackal comes back with a new mask that looks like a Jackal. But the rest of his body looks very humanoid. which set alarms off for me, because I knew that the Jackal. I mean, if you can make yourself look like a little green goblin, you can probably make yourself not look like a little green goblin. I don't know how genetic splicing works, but a man appeared. He knew a lot about Peter Parker and his history. He wore a Jackal mask. He was involved with cloning, and he had a company called New You that would allow dead people to come back to life by placing their old memories into clone bodies and essentially making them come back to life. The only caveat to that is if you did do that, you have to I think you have to take like a medicine every day
Yes.
in order to stop the clone degeneration.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, the Jackal persuades Peter Parker that he's legit. Okay, John, correct me if I'm incorrect here, but he persuades Peter Parker that this is all legit because doesn't he bring back Uncle Ben?
Well, I
He
think
brings somebody back, right?
he brings back Gwen Stacy first of all.
Okay.
I think he offers to bring back Uncle Ben as like the final roll of the dice to try and get Peter on
Yeah.
board
Oh,
with
yes,
it.
yes. And then Peter Parker's like, that's too far.
Yeah.
I've just remembered something we should have mentioned a little bit earlier. Corey,
Yes.
remember whenever Aunt May died?
Yeah. Well, no. Well, I remember
Okay.
she died in Civil War.
No, Aunt
She got
May
shot in
died.
Civil War.
Right. The whole reason that the two clones met each other was because Aunt May was at death's door.
Yes.
Way back in the 90s.
Yes.
Sure.
She died. Turns out that wasn't Aunt May.
Oh, like you do.
Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn hired an actress and got her to have facial reconstruction surgery to look like Aunt May, and
Hell of
then
a paying gig.
she died while he kidnapped the real Aunt May and kept her alive for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, why didn't he just kill the real Aunt May? What the fuck? But anyway, so then she came back, and then, like you said, in Civil War, then she died again, and then she came back to life again. So I just remembered after we did the Uncle Ben bit, but so now it's all good. But a lot of old Spider-Man adjacent people came back to life, and this was a great boon for everybody. And then through this entire process, it became apparent that the Jackal was not Miles Warren. It was Ben Reilly, which was a fun twist because all the way through this, Ben Reilly was being portrayed as not really a villain. All the way through this, it felt like the person doing this was doing this for a good reason.
Mm-hmm.
It never felt malicious like the Jackal would have, the Miles Warren version. But then it gets silly because the reason all of this happened was, again, John, feel free to step in here because I don't know, but at some point, the real Jackal, the Miles Warren version of the Jackal, after Ben Reilly died at the hands of Norman Osborn, because the Jackal is a master of cloning, was able to bring back Ben Reilly, but the way he did it, he was disappointed in the versions of Ben Reilly that he brought back. So he would kill that version of Ben Reilly and bring him back like 37 times until he got the right Ben Reilly that he wanted. Am I off base with that?
No, it sounds about right to me.
Okay. So after this happened, Ben Reilly obviously had some issues with his own psyche after being killed 37 times, 38 times if you count the Norman Osborn bit. And so now he was a bit mentally unstable. He did this whole gimmick to try and bring other people back so that clones could kind of live in their own world. I don't remember how this ended. I don't remember what the end game was. John, you could probably fill me in here because there was some sort of end game for Ben Reilly here. All I remember is that something happened, Spider-Man stopped him, and then at the very end of it, Ben Reilly and the real Jackal had a fight where the real Jackal apparently died, but obviously he didn't.
Yeah.
But what was his end game? Like,
I
why did
think
he do this?
I think it was just to sort of make death not a problem anymore. Like everyone could live forever. But
Yeah, I read the synopsis of this.
Okay.
But yeah, obviously they could only do so through his sort of
So,
technology and
did
through
you-
having his pills as well. So
Did you mention that when they were trying to bring Ben back, they killed him 27 times?
27 times. I thought it was 37 times.
He's 27. Yeah. So that's he obviously was very psychologically traumatized from remembering 27 or 28 different times he died.
Well, I see. This is the thing I was thinking about, because I'm like, if this is a clone body you're doing this to, a clone mindset and stuff, like, how does, like, at some point I was like, how far into this do I look logically? Like, does it actually happen? Like, why would you retain those memories? I don't understand how any of this works. You know? But then again, maybe that's me trying to look into it too much. I don't know why you would retain the knowledge of dying 37 times, like, or 27.
Seems like a gross oversight on the person conducting the experiment.
Again, that's part of it. You're like, well, Miles Warren's an insane character. Why wouldn't he do something insane like this? And you're like, well, because he's trying to make the perfect clone. Why would he intentionally take a clone that worked? The only clone that worked was Ben Reilly, and he took that clone that worked.
I don't know. Spidercide looked pretty cool.
Yeah, but he
You're
died.
telling me you look at that guy and that's not perfection?
How did Spidercide die? We don't remember.
We don't remember.
Nobody remembers.
Got hit by a car.
We put cement on his lungs.
Oh my god! I just looked up another picture of him. He's beautiful.
Beautiful boy, but he's dead and gone. That's one clone they're never gonna bring back. You know. So anyway, regardless, after this, it became established that Ben Reilly was back and the Jackal was also back. The Jackal has made like very few appearances since then. He made one in Spider Island, I think.
Can I stop you for a moment and just say Spidercide apparently died after falling from the Daily Bugle once it was revealed that the Jackal had deceived him. He just fell off a building.
Wait, isn't that how the Jackal died? He fell off a building?
People gotta stop falling off buildings.
In the 90s, like whenever he supposedly died in the 90s, I thought he just fell off.
Oh no, hold on. He was put in a stasis chamber as a precaution. At some point, Spidercide escaped the stasis chamber and decided to learn how to be human by attacking Ben Reilly, who at the time was struggling with his identity as Peter's clone, but also by dating multiple people, whom he ended up killing because they wouldn't reveal what he sought, letting him to be known as the first date murderer, as he usually killed them on the first date.
Wow. First date murderer. Was he dressed as Spidercide when he went to the date?
I do not know. I'm going to keep looking. You keep talking. I'll provide the Spidercide updates.
Yeah. Okay, Corey. You look after Spidercide part of this, and we'll do the Ben Reilly part, which is kind of what the show was about. What I like about this is it has kind of like been more about the Clone Saga, really, but we're still developing. There's still a little bit more Ben Reilly to go, which is kind of where we both fall off, I guess.
Yeah.
So the Jackal, like I said, kind of appeared a little bit after that. Ben Reilly, for a little bit, didn't appear because it felt like, how do we reintroduce this guy? We had a really big storyline that brought him back, but also introduced like those crazy consequences of him dying 27 times, having a very fragile mind. How do we bring him back? And I think they did bring him back as the Scarlett Spider.
Yes.
Briefly.
Like, not long after, I think, the end of this, he basically goes off to Las Vegas, I think it was, and gets into a Kaine over who's going to, continue with the Scarlet Spider identity. Mm-hmm. They give him a new costume, which nobody likes.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends
I've read
up
this series, actually.
There you go.
Did you like it?
I love Peter David's work, and I liked Ben Reilly, so I thought it was going to be a really great series. And there were some very confusing parts, but yes, John, that is my favorite part about this. They debuted a new costume, and it was received so poorly that Ben Reilly had to steal a Scarlett Spider cosplay from a fan and wear it, which was how they got back to him wearing his original outfit. It's a cosplayer recreation.
That's
So
bad.
what was his characterization like in this? Was he sort of damaged
So
psychologically?
yeah, Ben was still like he still was convinced that he was doing the right thing by trying to clone people. And he was approached by this crime boss who ran a casino whose daughter was dying, and she believed that he was Peter Parker. So she was like, I need you, because this was during the Parker Industries post Superior Spider-Man run. Um, she's like, I need you to cure my daughter. And so like he was trying to figure out a cure for her while also trying to like justify his actions to himself. Meanwhile, like he would also like his like conscious would talk to him and be like, no, what you did was wrong. You need to just acknowledge that it was wrong and that you were fucked up. He ends up making a deal with Mephisto in a crossover arc that featured like Ghost Rider and I think Red Hulk and somebody else, maybe Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to him interacting with Death, who is a part of the series as well, because his body started to fail. He was starting to degenerate and get a bunch of scars and shit. And Death basically said like your soul is so corrupt because someone shouldn't live and die 27 times that like the next time that you die and are brought back, your soul is going to just be completely deteriorated and you're going to be like a monster, just a sociopath, because you have no conscience anymore. So there was a lot to that series. And I remember it ended in the most unsatisfactory way possible because it was leading to another big spider crossover event that I did not read.
Okay.
So basically, like the little girl dies, but she's saved and becomes this like angelic figure, and that Ben like sacrificed himself to save her. And so her using her like miracle powers resurrected Ben, not knowing it was going to cause him to be a sociopath. And that's how the series ended, is that Ben's back and he's crazy because the angel of a dead girl resurrected him.
Well, here's my issue with that, right? I mean, obviously, there's lots of issues with that, but
Yes.
my issue with that is, in that story, they say, you know, you being dead and resurrected 27 times is gonna really fuck with your psyche. So if you're killed and resurrected one more time, that will send you over the deep end, right?
Yeah.
But as we've established in this show, he died before that when Norman Osborn killed him. So he already has died 28 times and been brought back. So he should already be in psychosis if 28 is the number.
Does the first death not count because the body completely deteriorated?
But doesn't he have memories of all of that? Isn't that part of it?
Do we know that the memories weren't just implanted into him though?
So how does that work? Do you get memories right up until your death and then question mark and then now you're alive again? Because wasn't part of, and again, Corey, you haven't read this, so I'm going to ask John this, but wasn't that part of the new you thing? Like surely they would have acknowledged his old life. They have to acknowledge his Ben Reilly life. They have to also acknowledge his death at Norman Osborn's hands, right? Like, how can you go from him being Ben Reilly to question mark to being killed and resurrected 27 times? The fact that Kaine, or the fact that the Jackal was able to resurrect him the first time is because he died. So he has died 28 times.
But I don't know.
It's
I think
so complicated. It's so
needlessly complicated. Yeah.
Needlessly complicated. Corey, this is what we had to deal with in the 90s. This is
So
what we went through. This is our pain. The Spider-Man pain. You had no idea. And they kept doing it. We're in the 2000s now. The 2010s now. And they kept doing clone stuff. Stop cloning.
So
That was
to give you your Spidercide update, he did turn up last year in a series called Spine Tingling Spider-Man.
What? What?
Yeah.
So he's not dead?
No.
But didn't he degenerate like all the clones are supposed to?
No, he fell off a building and they put him in a stasis chamber, apparently.
He was dead.
But he didn't deteriorate. I don't know, man. But last year, Spidercide returned in Spine Tingling Spider-Man.
What did he do?
He attacked Spider-Man in a tingling fashion, preferably around the spine area.
Sounds tingly.
Just-
Well,
So at some point, though, Ben
Yeah.
Reilly ends up back in New York, and he seems pretty normal because he's basically taken over from Peter Parker as Spider-Man when Peter Parker gets like radiation poisoning or something like that, and then
yeah.
he falls into a coma. So like, how have we gone from like psychotic Ben? I feel like we've missed something on the
Yep.
the
There's-
pathway.
There were so many like Spider-Verse like crossover events that I know that Kaine and Ben were big parts of. That
Yeah.
it's like it's going to be really hard because you had to have read all of these fucking miniseries
Kaine
for
was
it to have made sense.
Kaine was a big part of Spider-Verse at the end of it. The
Mm.
original one, anyway. I don't remember the second one that well, but I know that Kaine was a big part of the original Spider-Verse, which I guess is a interesting way to like, rehabilitate that character. I don't like it because I don't think it's very original Kaine-like, but
All right, so here we go. Ben was resurrected a 28th time by Otto Octavius, who revealed that he and Ben had planned for this to happen, and Ben stated that it had given him a clean slate. Not only has his scars disappeared, but apparently this last death resurrection had made him sane again. Isn't that
What?
nice how that turned out? As he
What?
declared, it had, quote, put him back to factory settings.
how?
After the Inheritors were defeated, Ben, like the rest of the Spider Army, returned home. Ben returned to Las Vegas, and this is where, oh boy, Ben returned to Las Vegas where he fought Conan the Barbarian and Nyla's Skin, thinking they were bad guys, but they were able to knock him out. And then he returns to New York. So there you have it.
Oh well, that John, I don't know about you, but that cleared up everything for me, right?
Yep, no more questions.
All right, off we go. Ben Reilly, everybody. I think there's a little bit more though, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, unfortunately.
Yes.
This, by the way, so like I said, I, read all the comics in the 90s. Big Ben Reilly fan. My brother is a big Ben Reilly fan. We both loved him. We were so excited to see him back. We both read Dead No More, Clone Conspiracy. Didn't mind it. Thought it was fun. And then Ben Reilly came back recently, and we talked about that. And we had very similar opinions about this. And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that these similar opinions that me and my brother had are quite similar to the ones that me and John have
Mm-hmm.
about Ben Reilly coming back. Now, this is where things get fuzzy because I haven't read Spider-Man the last couple of years. It just, I don't know why. Maybe because shit like this happens. But Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Ben Reilly is there. And somehow, and maybe either somebody on the show can fill in the blanks, or maybe somebody in the comments can fill in the blanks about this. I'd love to read a 78 paragraph comment on YouTube about this. But at some point, Ben Reilly becomes evil.
Well, before that, he becomes Spider-Man. Because, like I say, Peter falls into a coma.
Yes.
And New York needs a Spider-Man, so Ben Reilly's there. He takes over. Everything's going swimmingly for a little while. But at this point, there's some sort of weird situation with the Spider-Man gimmick where I think it's like been trademarked by a company called Beyond, who just trying to monetize it. So Ben is basically working for them, but still doing his like superheroics and like saving people and stuff. But Yeah, like all big corporations, this Beyond seem like they have some ulterior motives, perhaps, and um, they start manipulating him a bit and like messing with his memories as well. And I think that kind of you know, it messes with Ben Reilly's mind, which has already had a lot of psychological damage over the years from all the dying and resurrections and everything else he's gone through.
So
Um,
to throw in my 2 cents real quick, I was
You have
optimistic.
questions?
Oh no, these are just comments. I do not have questions so far. Um, I was very optimistic about this run when I saw like, oh, we're gonna do a series where Ben Reilly's Spider-Man. I was like, fuck yes, because I've been really into a lot of the '90s like callbacks and nostalgia runs that have been going on lately. I got the first issue, read it, thought it looked fun, didn't pick it up because I had other stuff going on at the time, but I'm like, all right, I'll keep an eye on this. Um, took some different directions than I was expecting, but it kind of that's always happens to me in Spider-Man books. I feel optimistic at the start, and then I just go, oh no.
Oh, what happens? That pretty much every single run you've ever read in Spider-Man, you're gonna love it at the beginning. The way it goes.
Yeah. So John, do you want to continue on to the birth of Chasm?
well, I can't really remember how it ended. Like, I know they kind of like Peter wakes from his coma and they go to like confront this Beyond corporation, and somehow I think Ben ends up falling into some sort of,
Fell into a
or
chimney.
yeah, a chimney filled with some sort of
Son of
gooey
a bitch, it happened
substance.
again.
Not again.
But yeah, no. So yeah, there is like an explosion. It seems like he dies, but
Can I really quickly read what it says on Wikipedia?
by all means,
Yeah.
So there's some kind of conflict between Peter Parker, Ben Reilly, and the Beyond Corporation, like we mentioned.
Mhm.
This is a quote from Wikipedia. In the ensuing conflict, Ben is swept up under strange chemicals called, quote, quantum shifting polymers in a psycho-reactive medium, unquote, which are unleashed to rewrite and remake the actual physical matter of their headquarters to hide the evidence of their misdeeds. So that should explain everything.
Okay.
there you go.
Quantum shifting polymers in a psycho-reactive medium. What part of that are we confused about?
Nothing.
No, it's all that's it. That's so Peter Parker survives this, but Ben seems to be lost in the wreckage of the former Beyond Corporation headquarters. However,
Yes.
months later, Ben resurfaces and he's undergone some changes due to his exposure to the quote quantum shifting polymers end quote. Oh, I love comics. I love comics. Dude, if we ever become comic writers, just remember you can get away with anything just by saying bullshit like that. Quantum shifting polymers.
It's great.
That's it.
So yeah, we also forgot about they got Ben's girlfriend out of prison and she was like living with him, and then she also became a villain because of this stuff too.
Right.
Yes. Again,
Hallows Eve.
that was a real shame because back in the 90s, Ben Reilly did have a girlfriend, Janine.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was Elizabeth.
Was it Elizabeth? Oh, hang on, she had a fake name.
Yeah, I think Janine was the fake name.
Okay, Janine might be the one I'm thinking of. The woman she had a whole run in with the law and she faked her. They came up with a new identity when she met Ben Reilly in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a wonderful. I read that miniseries. It was wonderful. I loved it. It did so much like character work for Ben Reilly in the 90s. And then now they're like, remember that happened? Here we go. Gotta do it again. So they brought, not only did they bring Ben Reilly back, but they brought his girlfriend back, and then they made her evil. And I'm like, this is not the future I envisioned.
Well,
whenever I was 10.
Ben also formed an alliance with another famous evil clone, Madeline Pryor.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we're being nitpicky, that bit I liked because, like you said, clone and clone, strange
Clone
bedfellows. It makes
violence,
sense.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Now I saw this because Chasm showed up in the Dark X-Men comic that came out like a year ago.
Okay.
He was like one of the primary villains in it.
Just hanging out.
Pretty much.
But so like the crux of this is it's just gone, and again, like we said at the beginning, it's just all gone back to status quo.
Well, I
Yeah.
I don't know. It kind of hasn't, because like now Ben is the villain and Kaine is the hero.
But isn't Ben like back in limbo?
Yeah, but
He is
I'm
currently being
guessing
held in
he's-
limbo.
If he's being held, he's like, it sounds like he's still a
Yeah,
bad guy.
Listen, hopefully we've been able to accurately pinpoint everything you ever need to know about Ben Reilly, the Clone Saga, the Jackal, Kaine, Spidercide. Corey, if you got anything else you want to say
Seward,
about,
the Traveler.
Spidercide, what's the Spidercide update?
I'm gonna guess he didn't have such a big run in Spine-Tingling Spider-Man, because in the same solicitation of issue 1, it says after surviving an attack from Spidercide. So I'm gonna guess that Spidercide didn't last too great in that fight.
That's a shame, but still he was there. At least he participated. That's cool. We
Yep.
got loads of clones, hopefully we were able to like put a fine pin onto every issue, every question you might have had about Ben Reilly or any of the other clones or the Jackal. The Jackal, by the way, where's he? Who gives a fuck? Not important.
Yeah.
He's up to something. He'll be back. Whenever I get my run in Marvel, I'm going to have the Jackal clone Armless Tiger Man 1,000 times. When are Marvel going to wise up and give us the comics that we deserve? AKA
Like-
written by us.
Armless
we
Tiger Man,
finally
number one.
get to write that Spider-Side adventure that the world is begging for.
The Spider-Side Armless Tiger Man team up.
Yes, and Hydra Man is in there too. Well, thank you very much for listening to our bullshit about Ben Reilly. We really appreciate that. And also, of course, Spider-Side and all of the other guys. The Jackal,
Kaine.
Dr. Octopus, Lady Octopus, Sewer Trainer, Gaunt, a.k.a. Mendel Strom, the Robot Master, Judas Traveler, Scryer, the Norman Osborn, the doctor that delivered the baby for Mary Jane Watson,
Cyborg
Watson, what's his name? Peter Parker?
Yeah, that obscure character, Peter Parker.
Whatever that guy is. I don't know. And all of the other characters involved in the Clone Saga. Oh, the Hobgoblin with the robot arms.
Yeah, Robot Hobgoblin.
All of the classic characters that we've named. Swarm. There's so many.
He was there.
So many that we've named in this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. That would be really nice if you did. If you didn't, I don't care.
Yeah.
That'll be all right.
So
I would love it if somebody listened to like all 2 hours of this and just left a comment and goes, "That sucked." I'm like, "Great, you listened to it, so
Yeah.
fuck you."
Take that. So everybody, this has been the Smark Avengers and our discussion of Ben Reilly that morphed into a conversation about the Clone Saga. It's been a good one. We've had a couple of long ones in a row. This one went a little long, but not nearly as long as the last two. So if you listen to all of it, fantastic. If not, as Dylan said, fuck you. But this has been very enjoyable, and we hope to see you all again real soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Rawr.